Even before she was known as Joan Crawford, she was Lucille LeSueur, a girl from San Antonio, Texas, grappling with poverty and a home life that shifted incessantly. Her father left her mother not long after her birth, setting the family adrift and fueling her mother's search for work in multiple towns. That search ended for a time in Kansas City, Missouri, where they lived in or near a laundry facility that her mother operated or tended. Living in cramped quarters filled with the smell of detergent and the steam of washing machines left an indelible impression on her. She would later say that disarray and untidiness were among her greatest fears. When she was a teenager, the future actress discovered that she had an affinity for dance. She took part in local school performances when she could, sometimes turning to menial jobs, waiting tables, cleaning, doing whatever was necessary to pay for her lessons. Determined to escape the drudgery she had known for so long, she perfected her routines, honed her physique, and developed a stage presence that was said to glitter even when she performed in low-rent vaudeville houses. That relentless discipline attracted the attention of traveling producers and local theater managers, eventually leading her to try her luck on the East Coast, particularly in New York. Though Broadway proved a challenge, she managed to join chorus lines and small dance ensembles, performing in a handful of revues that showcased her charm and grace. Perhaps ironically, it wasn't Broadway but Hollywood that offered her the greater escape hatch. As Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, spotted her and invited her to undertake a screen test in Los Angeles. She arrived in the mid-1920s with a contract in hand, believing that the film capital of the world would provide the financial stability and personal freedom her childhood had lacked. Upon her arrival in Hollywood, she was still billed as Lucille LeSueur. The studio executives at MGM found the name unappealing, fearing that it sounded too awkward or might be mispronounced by audiences. Famously, a public contest to choose a stage name gave birth to Joan Crawford. Initially, she disliked the new name, complaining that it reminded her of crawfish, but eventually she came to accept it as part of her transformed identity. That sense of reinvention, so central to her life, manifested in the way she adapted to her first months in Los Angeles. She lived at the Hotel Washington in Culver City, a short walk from the main MGM lot. It was neither luxurious nor large, and she shared space with other hopeful contract players who, like her, were on the bottom rung of the studio system's hierarchy. In later interviews, Crawford spoke of how the cramped quarters and shared bathrooms took her back to the hardships of her childhood. Yet she was brimming with optimism because each morning represented a chance to mingle with directors, producers, or more established stars at the studio. She took every opportunity to learn about camera angles, lighting, and costuming, and she observed how sets were built and torn down, how meticulously stagehands managed each detail of filming. She absorbed it all, determined to leverage even the smallest advantage in her quest for a stable and glamorous life. Her earliest film roles in the silent era tended to be minor or uncredited, but her vivacity shone through. The late 1920s were a time of dramatic experimentation in Hollywood, and the flapper archetype was hitting its stride. Crawford's sparkling eyes, angular features, and ability to move with the poised energy of a dancer helped her stand out among the bevy of young actresses. She found particular success in flapper-oriented films like Our Dancing Daughters, Our Modern Maidens, and Our Blushing Brides. Though these roles might appear somewhat frothy, they laid the groundwork for her reputation. Her lively dance scenes and willingness to perform stunts impressed producers. Off the set, she endeavored to cultivate a polished persona, attending parties in carefully chosen outfits that reflected the era's jazz age glamour. Even then, she was known to fuss over the arrangement of chairs or the placement of centerpieces, as though orchestrating the ambiance around her with the same precision she brought to the screen. As her reputation soared, she began to earn more money, allowing her to exercise greater control over her living situation. In 1929, she married Douglas Fairbanks Jr., whose father was the legendary silent film star Douglas Fairbanks Sr., and whose stepmother was Mary Pickford, together known as Hollywood royalty. This marriage gave Crawford access to a social echelon she had only read about: dinner parties at the Fairbanks Pickford estate, known as Pickfair, where luminaries such as Charlie Chaplin, Gloria Swanson, and various European nobility might drop by. Although Crawford and Fairbanks Jr. were considered by many to be the junior couple in that circle, she adapted quickly to the opulent settings, memorizing etiquette rules and immersing herself in the discourse of the powerful. It was around this time that she purchased what would become her first grand home, a sprawling Georgian-style estate in Brentwood, Los Angeles. The property cost a reported $557,000, an extraordinary sum for the era, signaling a new level of wealth and stability for the once impoverished Lucille LeSueur. That Brentwood estate would become famously known as JoDo, a playful amalgam of the names Joan and Douglas. Although she and Fairbanks Jr. would divorce in 1933, Crawford held on to the property, investing her own taste and resources into transforming it into a personal sanctuary. JoDo spanned approximately 11,500 square feet of living space, boasting multiple bedrooms and bathrooms, a tennis court, a badminton area, gardens that were designed with tropical and formal elements, and even a playhouse outfitted with amenities like a ping-pong table and a small bar area. The exterior evoked a traditional elegance. The Georgian style often features symmetrical facades, a centered front door, and classical proportions, which contrasted somewhat with the Art Deco innovation sweeping Hollywood film sets at the time. Yet this more conservative exterior concealed lavish interior spaces that Crawford painstakingly designed. She favored plush carpets, often in pastel or neutral tones, which accentuated the sense of space and cleanliness. Silks, satins, and velvets adorned the furniture, and she was known to be somewhat exacting about maintaining the house's pristine condition, to the point of regularly checking for stray scuffs on the floor or ensuring each chair was pushed in at the same angle. A hallmark of JoDo's interior design was the sense of organized opulence. Crawford had grown up amidst chaos and disorder, so she sought to craft the polar opposite in her mansion. Each room, from living areas to bedrooms, followed a carefully mapped layout that lent a sense of continuity when moving from one room to the next. The color palettes often involved harmonious shades, soft greens paired with gold accents, pale blues balanced with silver. Decorative mirrors were placed strategically, serving not only to open up the space further, but also to reflect natural light around the rooms. On a deeper level, these design choices gave visitors the impression that they were in a grand stage setting, where everything was choreographed for visual effect. She frequently hosted dinner parties that became talking points in the Hollywood social scene. There might be an elegant buffet spread in the richly decorated dining room, a break for a tennis match or some rounds of ping pong out in the playhouse, and a final regrouping in a living area to screen a film or simply chat into the late hours. It all functioned smoothly, like a film production run by a meticulous director. Within the walls of JoDo, Crawford showcased both her love of entertaining and her personal ambition. In 1946, during the height of her career renaissance at Warner Brothers, she famously accepted her Academy Award for Mildred Pierce, while bedridden with the flu. The photograph of her propped against pillows, clutching the Oscar in her bedroom, circulated widely, embedding JoDo into the public consciousness as a glamorous bastion of Hollywood success. Yet it was not only a symbol of her celebrity. For Crawford, the estate also represented a bulwark against the precariousness she had experienced as a child. She could control every aspect of her environment, from the polish on the silverware to the exact spacing of the furniture. In some ways, it was a psychological fortress against the unpredictability of life. When guests left for the night, she would sometimes make rounds with her staff, straightening cushions, picking up even the slightest stray item, ensuring that the house's immaculate composure remained unbroken. Meanwhile, Crawford's career soared and took occasional dips, but always seemed to recover, underscoring her adaptability. She conquered the transition from silent films to talkies, overcame a box office lull that had once seen her labeled box office poison, and then claimed her place among the great leading actresses of the 1940s. After her tenure with MGM ended, she signed with Warner Brothers, where she struck gold with Mildred Pierce. Despite the success, her personal life remained somewhat tumultuous. Following her divorce from Fairbanks Jr., she entered into other marriages, including one to Franchot Tone, a fellow actor, and later to Alfred Steele, an executive who would become the chairman of Pepsi Cola. That final marriage introduced Crawford to a realm beyond the Hollywood studios, the corporate sphere, where she found fresh ways to demonstrate her resourcefulness. She assumed a role as a Pepsi board member, traveled for business conferences, and used her star power to promote the brand. When she and Alfred Steele settled into New York City, they chose a penthouse on Fifth Avenue in the exclusive Imperial House building overlooking Central Park. The property was vast, originally featuring some 18 rooms, though Crawford had them reconfigured to better suit her idea of an airy, sun-drenched sanctuary. She enlisted the services of William Haynes, a former actor turned interior designer whose clientele included not just Crawford, but also other Hollywood icons. Haynes had developed a unique style that married classical lines with modernist flourishes, often favoring well-lit, open-plan spaces. Their collaboration produced an apartment with an atmosphere reminiscent of California sunshine, transplanted into Manhattan sophistication. She had expansive windows installed wherever possible, and to amplify that sense of brightness, she chose a color palette of pastel hues, crisp whites, and carefully placed mirrors. In the heart of the apartment stood a free-floating staircase under a skylight, flanked by living areas that boasted plush seating in lemon yellows, pale blues, or soft greens. Crawford's personal affection for pink manifested most strongly in her master suite, a realm of pale rose walls, white drapes, and carefully chosen furnishings that continued her lifelong battle against clutter. Yet she also believed that Manhattan demanded a degree of practicality that Los Angeles living did not, so she integrated built-in cabinets, hidden compartments, and ample closet space. The corridor leading to the bedrooms featured storage behind seamless paneling that a casual observer might mistake for the walls themselves. The idea was to conceal everyday items, from cleaning supplies to extra linens, thereby maintaining the immaculate aesthetic that was as much her trademark as her strong facial features. Visitors marveled at how the light touched each surface, how even the office maintained a genial brightness that defied New York's reputation for dark wood and heavier interior designs. She would entertain Pepsi executives, film industry friends, and socialites from both coasts, seating them in gracefully arranged clusters of armchairs that allowed for intimate conversation. In every corner, one sensed that every lamp, every flower arrangement, and every art piece had been positioned with deliberation. To complete the effect, she sometimes displayed personal mementos in curated groupings, select awards, framed photographs with Hollywood luminaries or European aristocrats, reminding her guests of her storied past. The penthouse became a symbol of how she could pivot her persona to suit changing circumstances. Much like her film career, she never let an aesthetic become stale. She was quick to update design elements if she found them lacking. For instance, she might decide on shorter curtains to allow more sunlight to flood in, or she might swap out upholstery. If she discovered new fabric, she felt better suited the space. In many ways, her residences reflected her skill at reinvention. They were living, breathing manifestations of Joan Crawford's unwavering desire to exceed expectations and remain relevant. When Alfred Steele died suddenly in 1959, she was heartbroken, but she did not yield her role at Pepsi. Instead, she carried on, hosting Pepsi clients and continuing to fine-tune the penthouse for gatherings that mixed corporate talk with the glamour of a Hollywood legend. By the 1960s, her film career took another unexpected turn with the emergence of the horror genre as a new domain for older stars. She starred in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane alongside her longtime rival Bette Davis, and the film became a sensation. Younger audiences discovered Crawford anew, enthralled by the unsettling story of two aging sisters locked in a psychological battle. Off-screen, tension simmered between the two actresses, each with her own regal sense of self. Crawford managed her stress by returning to New York, to the penthouse that she had curated so lovingly, a retreat from the drama of film sets. However, in the late 1960s, financial advisors pointed out that maintaining such a grand home was draining her resources. Reluctantly, she decided to downsize to a slightly smaller but still luxurious apartment, 22G, within the same Imperial House building. Apartment 22G was no cramped space. It featured multiple bedrooms, a dining room, a maid's room, several bathrooms, and the same breathtaking views of Manhattan. Rather than lament the reduced scale, Crawford saw an opportunity to orchestrate another interior design triumph. She enlisted Carlton Varney for assistance, though she remained deeply hands-on. Before the first stick of furniture was moved in, she placed masking tape on the floors to map out exactly where each chair, table, and sofa would reside. Some of the custom pieces from her penthouse were simply too large to fit through the elevator or stairwell, prompting a dramatic scene in which a beloved sofa had to be hoisted by a crane and maneuvered through a terrace entrance. Once inside, it was placed at an angle she had predetermined. She used the maid's room to store her extensive collection of hats and shoes, converted one bedroom into a grand dressing area lined wall-to-wall with closets, and designed her own master suite so that it reflected the same pastel quietude she'd cherished in her previous space. The bathrooms often featured shower stalls rather than bathtubs, a preference she believed was more hygienic. Window ledges were often finished in a white laminate or other easily cleaned materials, ensuring she could wipe away dust or water spots without fuss. For all the changes in her life, one element remained constant: the pursuit of order and beauty in her immediate environment. These transformations might seem trivial to some, but they were fundamental to the image that Joan Crawford wanted to project. Whether at JoDo in Brentwood, the sweeping Fifth Avenue penthouse, or the downsized 22G apartment, she staked her claim to a domain that was meticulously curated. Her obsession with cleanliness became legendary. Visitors noted that doorknobs gleamed, windowsills were spotless, and the slightest sign of a watermark on a table might incur her wrath. She insisted that every cushion be plumped, every rug aligned, every object displayed to maximum effect. Some found this off-putting, regarding it as emblematic of a deeper need to control everything around her, possibly a reaction to her unstable childhood. Others saw it as an admirable sign of discipline, a fitting hallmark of an actress who had clawed her way to stardom by never letting standards slip, whether in performance or in personal presentation. It is telling that her fervent perfectionism in housekeeping parallels the stories of her demanding nature on set. Directors noted how prepared she was, how she knew her lines, and often the lines of her co-stars, inside out. She had opinions on lighting and camera angles because she had studied how they might affect her portrayal. That same exacting mindset extended to the set of her own life, her residences becoming stages for an ongoing performance of her carefully orchestrated self. This approach was not merely about vanity, it was also an assertion of control over a world that had once seemed chaotic and unkind. By molding her surroundings down to the last detail, she exercised a measure of authority that her early life had lacked. Beyond their aesthetic achievements, Crawford's residences also became intertwined with significant events in her career and personal life. JoDo was the site of that famed in-bed Oscar acceptance, a moment that showcased how theatrical she could be. The Fifth Avenue penthouse was a place where she merged Hollywood flair with corporate power, hosting Pepsi executives in a setting that demonstrated her star power had seamlessly fused with business acumen. Apartment 22G saw her through the final years of her life, offering a sanctuary when her health began to fail, and she withdrew from public events, partly out of fear that aging had made her less photogenic. While her later films, such as the William Castle thrillers Straitjacket and I Saw What You Did not generate the same critical acclaim as her earlier work, they showed she was still determined to remain relevant and to adapt to new cinematic trends. In this twilight stage, she began to receive fewer visitors, favoring intimate gatherings or smaller, meticulously curated dinners. Nonetheless, her standards never wavered. Those who visited her in the later years described immaculate spaces filled with carefully selected furnishings and personal items from her storied career. She still possessed that sense of showmanship. For instance, a particular way of drawing attention to certain photographs or awards so that her legacy as a formidable actress was never questioned. The tall windows provided ample natural light to highlight these keepsakes. Even in the final phase of her life, she was orchestrating narratives with the same care she had once brought to early talkies in the 1930s. Upon her death in 1977, Joan Crawford left behind a perplexing legacy. She had come from nothing, risen to the summit of Hollywood, fallen from grace at times, climbed back to triumph, and then carved out a corporate identity at Pepsi. She had adopted 4 children, Christina, Christopher, and twin girls Kathy and Cindy, and she had carefully orchestrated her image as a glamorous mother, posing in perfectly arranged holiday photographs and magazine spreads that showcased her gleaming homes. Yet after her death, Christina published Mommy Dearest, alleging horrific abuse and painting Crawford as a tyrant obsessed with tidiness. While these claims were disputed by other family members and friends, the public seized on them, mesmerized by the contrast between the meticulously presented Hollywood star and the potential for darkness behind closed doors. The wire hanger's story captured cultural imagination, bridging the gap between idolization and condemnation. Yet even that controversial memoir reinforced the sense that Crawford's mania for perfect order was a dominant force in her life, an extension of the elaborate sets she staged for visitors and reporters. In the decades since, the contradictory dimensions of her legacy have only heightened interest in her homes. Historians, film buffs, and even real estate enthusiasts continue to search for archival photographs, written descriptions, and old newspaper clippings that reference how the Brentwood estate was laid out, or how the layout of the Fifth Avenue penthouse changed after William Haynes or Carlton Varney updated it. People still debate whether the lush landscaping at JoDo leaned more toward a tropical or a classic English garden aesthetic, analyzing period photos to see if the hedges were shaped as topiaries or left to grow in more natural forms. Some attempt to reconstruct the interior color schemes of her New York apartments, discussing how effectively the pastel decor captured the natural light in the often overcast environment of Manhattan. Others note how these design choices might have mirrored evolving trends in interior design from the 1930s through the 1970s, reflecting her ability to remain stylish across 4 decades of incredible changes in culture and technology. Today, when we think of Joan Crawford, we often remember the iconic film roles, the ambitious women she played in Possessed or Mildred Pierce, the flamboyant or tormented characters she portrayed in her later horror projects. But it's equally revealing to consider how much effort she poured into designing her living quarters, as though they were another performance, another film set, where every prop had its place and every actor, be they domestic staff, family member, or dinner guest, had a role to play in her meticulously arranged production. Indeed, the architecture and interior design of Crawford's homes serve as a parallel narrative to her on-screen career. The color schemes, furniture, landscaping, and even the addresses themselves each mark a particular phase of her personal and professional journey. If one wanted to chart the arc of her life solely through the lens of where and how she lived, one would find a tapestry of transformations mirroring the bigger metamorphoses of her stardom.